Series 200, Chapter 71, How to Write a Letter. Text English, Spoken English. Goals of learning. We will learn that why should one learn to write a letter? What are different types of letters? What are essential parts of an official letter? What are different styles of official letters? What mistakes not to make while writing a letter? We will also learn about personal letters and email letters. Why learn letter writing? See, letter writing is essential if you want to communicate successfully your thoughts, your ideas, your requests, demands, complaints, feelings, all in writing. Not always you can communicate verbally or orally. There are times when you have to write things down, and that is why you need to learn writing a proper letter. For students, letter writing provides an excellent opportunity, because if there is a question on writing a letter in the exam, there is a good opportunity to get 100% marks on that question. Not many questions and not many subjects offer that opportunity where you can get 100% marks. Only math and letter writing are two areas where you can easily get 100% marks, and both are very easy to learn. Now, what are different types of letters? A letter can be an official letter. It can be a personal letter to your friend or to your family. It can be a letter to your community. For example, when you write in a newspaper column. It can be an email letter, and we will learn about these different types of letters in the following slides. Let's first learn about official letters. Now let's see what are different parts of an official letter. An official letter has 5 essential parts. There are a few more, but 5 parts are very essential. On the top is the sender's address or contact details. Next is receiver's address or contact details. Then there is salutation like dear sir, respected madam, etc. After that is the body of the letter, where you write whatever you want to say in an orderly manner. And the last one is the sender's signature area, where you write things like thanking you, yours sincerely, yours faithfully, etc. And there are a few more parts, but we will talk about all these in details in the following slides. Sender's address tells who sent the letter. If the receiver of the letter wants to send a written reply back, then this is the address where the reply will be sent. Now, sender's address is written on top of the letter. The first part of the letter is the sender's address, telling where the letter is originating from and who has written it. The reason for writing it on the top is that when the receiver, the person who gets the letter, opens the letter, he or she can immediately see where the letter has come from and who has written it. In some countries like America, this sender's address is written aligned to the left margin of the paper. In other countries like the UK or India, the sender's address is written aligned to or in line with the right margin of the paper. So, depending on which country you are in, your sender's address will be written either on the left margin or on the right margin, and I will show you some examples. So what is included in sender's address or contact details? The first line is the sender's full name, first name and then last name. The second line in the sender's address is the street address. What is a street address? Street address is what is the building number and on what street is that building. So for example, 123 Main Street is a street address. After the street address is city and state. The fourth line includes the zip or pin code, whatever you call in your country, that is written in the fourth line, and the fifth line is the date when the letter is written. Write the date clearly, because sometimes you have to send a follow-up letter and then you will need to refer to this date, so write it very clearly. What we saw in the previous slide were the basics about the sender's address or contact details, and in this slide we will see what can be the variations of those basics. We said that the first thing we write in the sender's address is the first and the last name of the sender. Note that in some countries we write Mr. or Mrs. or Miss or Doctor. Countries like India and England, we write all these suffixes in front of the individual's name. In countries like America, they don't write these suffixes, they write the name directly without Mr., without Mrs., without Miss, without Doctor. They just write the name directly, and I will show you some examples. The second thing was that we said that after the name is the street address. However, that is when you are writing to a company as an individual. But if you are writing to a company from a company, then the second line will be your designation. That what are you? You are the president, you are the sales director, you are the vice president for marketing. That will be there. The third line, if you are writing from a company to a company, will be your company's name. Especially if the letter is not written on a letterhead, then you have to include your company's name. And then of course the street address, as we mentioned earlier. The next line is for the city and state. You write your name of your city and your state. In some countries they only write the city's name in this line, and the state's name is written in the next line along with zip or pin code. So depending on what country you live in, you have to follow the rules. The city and state, for example, is written in the same line in India, in England, in Canada, but the state name along with the zip is written separately in countries like America, So be careful where you are, because the automated postal systems can quickly separate the letters if you are following the rule of the country where that letter is going or where you are. So if you are writing within your country, follow the rules of your country. If you are sending it out, it will be a good idea to know the rules. Next thing is, if you are sending an international letter from your country to another country, then in the sender's address you must write your country's full name clearly, because when the receiver is writing back to you, he or she should have easy access to where the letter has to be sent back. Don't write abbreviations or names which are not very known. So if you are sending from India, write India. Don't write Bharat or Hindustan or something like that. If you are sending from United Kingdom, write UK or United Kingdom. Avoid writing England, which is not a common name known throughout the world, but UK is known. We already talked about writing the date clearly. Some people also write their phone number after the date, and that way all the contact information for the sender is available in one place, and that is the top of the letter. Here are two examples of sender's address. One is left margin aligned. This is called left margin aligned. This type of sender's address is written in countries like America. The other type of sender's address is written aligned to the right margin. See, this is the right margin. And this type of address aligned to the right margin as sender's address is written in countries like India and the United Kingdom. So just to show you the difference between two types of where the addresses are written, and this is an example of an individual writing to a company, so there is no designation, no company name, etc. Next, let's look at what does receiver's address include. The receiver's address is written below the sender's address after giving one space between the sender's address and the receiver's address. If there is enough paper, blank paper available, then you can give two spaces between the sender's address and the receiver's address, but one space is sufficient. You write the receiver's first and last name if you know that information. When you are writing to a company, many a times you do not know the name of the person that you are writing to. So if you do not know the name of the person you are writing to, omit this line, delete it, don't use it. Start with the second line. And the second line is the designation of the receiver. He is the president, he is the sales manager, he is the accounts manager. So the designation of the receiver. Sometimes you even do not know the correct designation of the receiver, and then you can write the department. So you can write sales department. Along with that sales department, you can add the manager, the supervisor, or something like that, what you think is the most appropriate designation. The next line is the company that the receiver works for. The fourth line is the street address, where the company is located, and I told you the street address includes the name of the street and the number of the building. The next line is city and state, and the final line is the zip or the pin code where that company is located, where this letter is going. Again, if it is an international letter, you can add the name of the country after the zip or the pin. After the receiver's address, you can write something like called REF or called a reference. And what is meant by reference? A reference means in a very short line you tell what is this letter about. A reference does not need grammar. It should not be 3 lines, 4 lines long. It should be as short as possible, but it should be communicating that what is this letter about. In the beginning you write REF, and then you write those few words like street light not working. So there is no need to focus on noun, pronoun, verb, but you need to focus on what is this letter about, especially if it's a very big company and you are sending a letter to their general mailbox, general receiving. Then if you write a reference, the person who opens the letter will immediately know where this letter has to go and will forward the letter to that department. There is no need to read the full letter before sending the letter to that department. So it may decrease the response time for your request or your letter. Remember, the reference should be very brief, usually 1 line, maximum 2 lines, never to exceed 3 lines, unless you are giving reference to previous communication. And suppose there is a company where you have written 4 times in the past, 4 letters, then you can write 1, 2, 3, 4 and give reference of those letters. So you number, if there is more than 1 item in the reference, you number those 1, 2, 3, whatever number of references are there. So in reference you write what is this letter about, and if there was a previous communication you add that in the reference area. After the reference is the salutation at the top of your body of letter. The salutation should be appropriate to the person that you are addressing the letter to. So you can say respected sir, respected madam, if for example to your teachers, to government officials. You can say honorable sir or honorable so and so. That is used for judges, for principals, for holy people. But don't write dearest so and so in official letter. You can write dear so and so if you know the name, but not dearest. Dearest is reserved for your family, who are, for some people who are very close to you. So be careful, do not write dearest. Even if suppose your wife or your husband works in the government and you are writing to them officially, don't write dearest. For official purposes it is dear. Next comes the body of the letter. In body of the letter, that is the main area where you write whatever you wanted to write. You communicate whatever you wanted to communicate. So body of the letter, you leave 1 space between dear sir and dear madam or whatever you have written as salutation, and then the body of the letter you need one space, line space, and then you write body of letter as paragraphs. We have another presentation where you can learn how to write a good paragraph. But some guiding principles of writing a paragraph is that each paragraph should discuss one issue or one point only. Don't include 3-4 points in the same paragraph or the reader will be confused. The second thing is that the paragraphs should not be very long. Should not be like 12 lines, 20 lines. No. They should be 3 to 5 lines, maximum 8 lines. The paragraphs should flow one from another. So the first paragraph and second paragraph should be slightly linked to each other. The issue you are talking about should be linked to each other. Same with second and third paragraph and third and fourth paragraph. Never use abusive language, nasty language, insulting language, because when you are talking, what you talked is over the moment you stop speaking. But in writing, everything is documented there, and even otherwise you don't want to do it because you are a nice person, and being abusive and nasty and insulting doesn't get your work done. So why use that language? Also, in the body of the letter, be professional and not personal. So be professional, show respect, because if you show respect, you will get respect. Another thing is in the body of the letter that be clear and be firm, and if possible be straight on what you want. Many a times people write indirect sentences going around the issue, and that doesn't help because most people who work in companies don't have time to sit and read all that. If they find something straightforward, they can take action on that. So avoid complex sentences, very complex words, because many a times your letter will be read by somebody who has just like studied 10 classes, and so avoid doing that, writing a very complex letter, writing very complex sentences, writing confusing paragraphs, insulting. Avoid all that. Be straight, be simple, be firm, be direct, be respectful, and those are the few principles of writing the body of your letter. If you have more than say 3 issues to talk about in the letter, then it will be a good idea to number your issues. Then you can write, okay, number 1, discuss that issue, number 2, discuss the second issue, number 3, discuss the third issue, and you can even write the title of the issue if you want to. From exam point of view, you will not get a question where you have to write that long a letter. So stick to the principles that I have told here, that short paragraphs, short sentences, simple and straight talk or simple and straight writing, focusing on what you want, no complexities. When you make things complex, you are more likely to make mistakes, and then the teacher or the evaluator has an opportunity to cut marks. So if you write something complex and you make a mistake, instead of 10 out of 10 you'll get 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. The purpose in exam is to get full marks, not to show off, and that is what you need to focus on. Next comes the appropriate ending of the letter. So if your body of letter was long, Then you summarize the issue or issues that you were talking about in a small paragraph. Remember, you don't have to rewrite everything. You summarize in very short. That way, the person who is reading your letter will also have an idea as to what he has to do in response to your letter. Thank the receiver if needed. In most cases, it is needed. So, thank the receiver. Give an opportunity to the receiver using this part of the letter to contact you if needed. The receiver may like to have more information before he takes any action or before she takes any action on what you have requested, and if you leave this opportunity open, you are more likely to get your issue resolved in time. And politely, in most cases, I know sometimes you may not be very happy, but you can't be nasty or abusive or insulting. You may not write anything, but a good idea will be to end politely, because that will get your work done. There are more chances it will get your work done than not being nice. Now, examples of ending a letter are like, please feel free to contact me if you need any further information, or you can write thanking you for your cooperation or thanking you for your kind attention. So end your letter leaving a good taste in the mouth of the reader. Okay, don't leave a bad taste in the mouth of the reader, challenging him and this and that, I will do this. No. In the exam, it is even more important that you end appropriately, that you can get full marks. Next is the signature area. Signature area of an official letter contains more than just signatures. In this area, you once more have an opportunity to be gentle, and you can write something like yours truly, yours sincerely, yours faithfully. Leave 2 spaces above and 2 spaces below this yours truly or yours sincerely, etc., especially if you have in a space. After that, write your full name, because your signature most cases won't tell that who is writing the letter, and you don't want the person to go back to the top to see who wrote the letter. So here you can write your name again. Some people include the telephone number here instead of on the top in the sender's contact details. Either way, wherever you put it, it's fine. There is no need to put it twice. But if you want to give your phone number, then this is a good place to write your phone number. If you don't want to give your phone number, there is no compulsion. Don't give your phone number. Many a times people don't want to give their phone numbers. By tradition, the email is included in this area. I know it could very well be included in the sender's contact information, but somehow by tradition the sender's email, and if you have a website and you want to give that, that is included here. So this is the signature area. When you are signing a letter officially, avoid having signatures which are too small, too big, because your signatures tell about you. So learn to do a signature which reflects what you are. There is a whole science about signatures. If they are big, what it means; if they are small, what it means. But avoid extremes. After the signature area, if you are sending something along with your letter, you can write ENCL and then list what you are sending. Be careful, it's not a description of what you are sending. It is just telling the receiver to look for those things that you are sending. So you can say 2 pictures of my property if you are writing the letter in reference to your property. So if you are enclosing more than 1 items, you can number them, number 1, number 2, number 3, but this place is not for the full description but only for enumerating things, that okay, these are the things being sent. One important issue from exam point of view, in the exam most of the time you are not sending anything when you are writing a letter in the exam, so there is no need to write this ENCL when you are in the exam. If you are not enclosing anything, there is no need to write ENCL at all. Another thing, after the ENCL, if you are sending a copy of your letter to other people, you can write CC and then you can mention who you sent the copy of the letter to. The copy you sent should be exactly the same that you have sent to this person. In the past, it was done to expedite things. Suppose a company has a head office in one city and you are communicating with somebody in another city, so you send the material simultaneously. With emails, you see CC or BCC, we'll come to that later on. So if you wrote, for example, to your teacher that you are not coming today, and you also sent a copy to your principal, so that's where you can write CC. But if you are not copying or not sending the copy to anybody, there is no need to write CC. Again, in the exam, there won't be a need to write CC, but it's good to know. Now the final steps that you take before you send your letter, your official letter out, is to check for any spelling mistakes, any grammar mistakes. The reason is these mistakes are very common in written letters, especially by the beginners. So if you are starting to write, there's a good chance that there will be spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes. One way to avoid that is if you practice writing letters again and again, then after you have written say 30 letters or so, these mistakes will decrease. But to do that, you have to practice a lot. Even then, especially in the exam, you make sure your letter does not have any spelling mistakes or any grammar mistakes. Always read your letter and make sure that the flow is good. When you are using a computer, if you use spell check, be careful, because sometimes the computer's spelling and grammar is not what you want, because they can totally end up changing the tone of your letter. So if you are using a computer to check spelling and grammar, accept or reject every suggestion made by the computer individually. Bottom line is that there should be no spelling mistakes in a well-written letter. There should be no grammar mistakes in a well-written letters. There should also be no factual mistakes about the address, about the name, about the contact details. So just don't write date and then forget writing the date, or write telephone TEL and then forget to write the telephone number. Be careful and if you read the letter a final time before you send it, you will be able to eliminate these mistakes. Now let's talk about a letter to a relative. When you are writing a letter to a relative or a friend of yours, details sender's address is not needed because they already know your address. So unless you are writing from a new address, you have moved into a new house, then you can add your sender's address. Otherwise there is no need to write the sender's address every time you write to a relative. Same way, there is no need to write a detailed receiver's address or contact details because you already know who you are writing to, and there is only one person that will be getting that letter, or they know who is getting the letter. It's not like a big company where nobody knows who will be getting the letter. The next thing is signature details are not needed. Your phone number, your email, all those things are not needed because they already know it. If they don't know it, you can add it in the body of the paragraph. But in most cases, they already know it. So there is no need to write your full name below your signature or your phone number or your email. A simple signature is sufficient. In a letter to a relative, reference, enclosed, CC are not needed because you are not doing an official communication. Also, you can use more personal language like dearest, my dearest, with love when you are writing to a relative, a personal letter to your wife, to your children, to your parents, to your friend. You can write a more personal language. Same way, in the body, you don't have to stick so much accurately to the grammar or something. Many times when you write to a relative, you write a poetry, and most poetry has no grammar. So the letter to a relative or a friend is very different from an official letter. Two things which are not official but are important when you are writing to a relative. See, the company supervisor or boss or president or even the company may not be there forever. The company boss will be transferred, the company may collapse, may be sold to another company, but the relatives will be there for you and with you forever. So you have to be extra careful to be kind and friendly and close in your letter, that you don't hurt anybody's feelings. See, if you hurt a relative's feelings once, many a times you create bad blood or bad feelings for years, maybe a lifetime. So be extra kind and careful when writing to a relative or a friend. Never write a letter to your relative or friend when you are angry, because when you are angry you will end up writing so much that you will regret later on, and so it's not a good idea. Actually, you should never write or should not write to anybody when you are angry, because when you are angry you are not yourself. You end up saying things which you don't mean. So don't write a letter when you are angry. Now, letter by email. When you are writing a letter by email, usually the sender's address and the receiver's address and contact details are not needed because the email address works as sender's address and receiver's address. However, there are no fixed rules. You can as well write a typical letter that we talked about in your email also. Especially if you want the other party, the receiver, to communicate to you by regular mail, then you can add your sender's address and receiver's address and write a typical official letter as we talked about earlier. However, in most cases, if your issue will be resolved through exchange of emails, the sender's address and the receiver's address are not needed. In an email, indent is not used at the beginning of the paragraph because in computer language sometimes the indent can end up making your letter look very confusing. But again, there are no fixed rules. When you send an email letter, you can easily attach pictures, old documents, copies of old documents as attachments. It's very easy to do that. Also, you can send copy to many other people by clicking on CC or BCC. So you can add that, and we will talk more about email letters in our discussion on the internet. When you are sending a letter by email, avoid the temptation of formatting too much because you can do it. That doesn't mean you should do it. The computer gives you an opportunity to write an email with words of different size, shape, color, but that confuses and irritates the person who is receiving the letter. So write the whole letter in the same font, same color, avoid underlining everywhere, and give a nice look to your letter, not by having too much in it, but by having too little in terms of different colors and different fonts in it. Another thing is that it's easy to check for spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes in the email letter, but as I said earlier, be very careful making the computer in charge of making those changes because sometimes the computers can totally change the meaning of your letter. To give you an example, in some countries the word honor is spelled as H-O-N-O-U-R. In other countries it is spelled as H-O-N-O-R. So color is said C-O-L-O-U-R. In other countries it is C-O-L-O-R. So you never know what the computer will end up doing to your letter. So let the computer suggest changes, then you evaluate those changes that you want to accept them or reject them, and either accept them or reject them and then send the letter. Email letters are notorious for making friends or turning friends into enemies because if you write an email letter when you are angry or something or emotionally excited, you may end up writing something which will not sound very pleasing to the person who receives it. So be careful when responding by email and never use abusive language, insulting language. It's very common with email letters, so be extra careful. Because the person is not in front of you, you think you are talking to the computer when you are writing, but really you are talking to the other person when he or she gets the letter. So be extremely careful writing an email letter because many a times people's careers have ended because they sent a bad email letter. They wrote things which were insulting or racist or the not in good taste. So be careful with this type of letter writing. Now, final review before sending the letter in mail. Never be abusive or insulting. Do not make spelling mistakes. Do not make grammar mistakes. Stick to one style throughout the letter. Not that you indent the paragraph in some places and don't indent in other places. You leave one space between paragraphs in some part of the letter, then you need leave two spaces in other parts. Don't do that. Stick to one style. Do not use inappropriate salutation. Like I said earlier, dearest has no place in official letters. Be polite, pleasant and firm in what you have to say. If you are mailing the letter, make sure there is appropriate postage attached to the letter, on the letter. And if you are mailing, make sure that the address is written neatly and completely, including your address, because in case the receiver cannot receive the letter because he has moved to another address or something, then your letter can come back to you and you can find out where the person has moved to and send the letter again. So the address should meet the local formatting for that country where you are sending the letter. There are two styles of official letters. There are two styles of writing official letters, and let's have a look at those. The styles of writing an official letter can be an American style or a non-American style. Non-American style is used in countries like the UK and in India and in many other countries, and the American style is used in America and many other countries. Now let's look at the American style of writing a letter, an official letter. You can also call it as the basic style for writing official letters, because basically it remains the same in both the styles, and I will show you what I mean and I will tell you what the differences are. Here is an example of a typical American style letter. I did not show examples of letters in the beginning of the discussion because that may have confused you, but here is an example of an American style letter. First thing you note in any official letter, any style of writing of official letter, is that there is about 1 to 1.5 inch space, that is about 2.5 to 3.5 centimeter space, blank space on top, towards the bottom, towards the right side and towards the left side of the letter. This space is left blank. On all four sides there is a blank space of an inch to an inch and a half, that translates to 2.5 to 3.5 centimeters approximately. Next thing to note in American style of writing an official letter is that every part of the letter starts from the left margin. So the sender's address, the receiver's address, the reference, the body, the signature, everything is starting from one line. There is no indent at the beginning of the paragraphs. Everything starts from this line. Here are various parts of an official letter. This is the sender's address or sender's details or sender's contact information. Here we will talk about all these parts in details in the next few slides. After the sender's details are the receiver's details. After that is the reference or REF, that is optional. After that is the salutation to the receiver. Then is the body of the letter, these two paragraphs. And in the end is the sender's signature area and other information about the sender. And in the end is ENCL or enclosed, and again this is optional. So these are the parts of a letter, and these parts remain the same in American style of writing and non-American style of writing. Only certain areas move to different place in this letter, but otherwise they remain the same, and I will explain that to you soon. Now, the sender's contact details are written on the top of the letter, and they include the first line as the first and the last name, the second line as the street address, the third line as the city's name, the fourth line is the state and zip or pin code, and then the country name if it's an international letter, and the last line is the date. Some people write the sender's telephone number below the date. Here it reads the first and the last name as AK John. The street address mentioned is 123 Main Street. The city's name written here is the North City in third line. The fourth line has the name of the state, which says Raj State 012345, which is the pin or the zip. Then it says March 1, 2014 or 2014, which is the date when this letter is sent. And as I said, some people add the telephone number here. That way all the information about the sender is in one place. Coming to a receiver's details, the first line has the name, that is the first and the last name if it is known, if you know it. The second line is the designation, again if you know it, otherwise you can write the manager or the supervisor, and the department. The next line is the name of the company. The line below that is the street address. After that the city address, followed by the state and zip in the next line, and the country's name if it's an international letter. Here it says Ashok Jain as the receiver's name because we knew it. Then the next line says director because he's the director in the company. The third line says Raj Maintenance Company, that is the company's name. The fourth line says 789 East Street because that is the street address. The next line mentions the city. Here it says some city, that is the name of that city. And the last line has the name of the state as Raj State, followed by the pin or the zip, which is 098765. So these are the details of the receiver's contact information. The next area of the official letter is REF, or this letter is in reference to. This is not always written, but if you can concise in a few words what you want to say, it's a good idea to write this. There is no need to stick to grammar in this area of REF or a reference to. This should be in most cases a line long at the most. It could be just a few words, 3 words, 4 words, that's more than enough. Should never be more than 2 lines long unless you are referring to previous communication where you wrote some company a letter many a times, 3-4 times, so then you put number 1 letter dated so and so date, number 2, number 3, number 4. But in a simple case, it should be a very straightforward, very short message, as it says here, reference street light not working, reminder. So this area should be short and sweet and tell the person what is this body of the letter in reference to, what is it about. Next comes salutation to the receiver. So you address the receiver of the letter respectfully and you write either dear or respected or whatever appropriate salutation, followed by the person's name if you know the name. If you do not know the name, you can write the person's designation and department, like dear sales manager, dear vice president marketing, etc. Rarely, if you don't know anything about where your letter will end up, you can remove this line, but only in the American system. In rest of the world, they write dear sir or dear madam or dear sir forward stroke madam. So you can write a general or dear manager or dear supervisor. So you write a common addressing designation here if you don't know the name. Very rarely, as I said, if you have no idea, in the American system you can remove this line, but in the other system, as used in India and in the UK and in many other countries, you write dear sir or dear madam or any appropriate salutation. Next is the body of the letter, where you write paragraphs on different issues, one paragraph flowing into the other and the other. Use active voice, use short sentences, do not confuse the reader, do not be rude or abusive, use proper paragraph formatting, and you may use the last paragraph to summarize the issue and to keep the communication channel open as mentioned earlier. Different countries need different formatting for these paragraphs, and you can learn about this formatting from our presentation on how to write paragraphs. For example, here there is no indent. In American writing, there is no indent at the beginning of the paragraph. There is no indent here. In non-American writing, like the one that is used in India and in the UK and many other countries, there is an indent, and I will show you what I mean by that. Next is the signature area, where the sender of the letter signs. Use 1 to 3 spaces depending on the size of your signature. Below the signature, write the full name of the person who has signed the letter. Then, if the signer has any email, write that email, and some people write the telephone number here, others write the telephone number after the date in the sender's contact information. If you want to write the fax number, that comes below the telephone number. Some people do not want to give their phone number or email, and then you don't write anything. There is no compulsion, there is no rule that you must give all this information. You only give the information you want to give. A word about spacing. See, there are 2 spaces between the sender's information and the receiver's contact information. There are 2 spaces between the receiver's contact details and the reference. There are two spaces between in reference to and dear Ashok Jain, the receiver of the letter. The reason is we want to keep this portion that tells what is the letter in reference to very clear, and we don't want to merge these two closely. If there is less space, you can finish the letter by using one space. You can use one space here and one space here, but for exam purposes use two spaces. The body of the letter only uses a single space. See, there is one space here, one space here. Then again, when you want to separate the information, you write two spaces, you use two spaces. So before yours truly you use two spaces. After yours truly you need to use two or three spaces. Here by mistake it's only one space. Then before enclosed you use one or two spaces depending on how much amount of space is available. So these are, but never write two parts without giving a space between them. Don't merge this and this, don't merge this and this, don't merge this and this. One space is a must. If there is space available, you can use two spaces in these areas that I showed to you. Then towards the end of the letter you write ENCL or enclosed. If you are enclosing something along with the letter, like copies of the previous communication or some photographs. If you are not enclosing anything, don't write anything, don't write ENCL and leave this out of the letter. About the phone number, some people write the phone number here after the signature, others write it after the date here. Wherever you write it, if you want to give your phone number, write it at one place and that's enough. If you don't want to give your phone number, don't write it. Somehow by tradition the email is written here after the signature. It is sender's information. It could as well have been here, but by tradition it is written here. The email and the website, if you want to give, they are written after the signature. Now once more reviewing three important features of the American system of writing an official letter. Everything starts from the left margin. There is no indent when the paragraphs start. There are no commas at the end of every sentence in addresses, and there is no Mr., Mrs., Doctor, etc. before the names. So these are the important features of the American way of writing an official letter. Now let's look at the non-American style of writing an official letter, the style that is used in the UK and in India and in many other countries. Now this is the sample copy of a letter that is non-American style. This type of letter is used in the UK and in India, and you can see there are some essential differences, and let's look at those differences. In the non-American way of writing letters, as in India and the UK, the sender's name is written aligned to the right margin. The sender's name and address and contact details are written aligned to the right margin. So also the signature area aligns to the right margin. Everything ends on the right margin. The second difference is that there is an indent. This is called the indent. The blank space before the first word of the first sentence of the paragraph is called indent, and it's about half an inch or an inch blank space. So the indent is used in the non-American system of writing. Here are some more differences compared to the American way of writing. This is a letter written in the non-American way, and this type of letter writing is followed in India and in the UK and many other countries. In addition to the sender's address and signature being aligned to the right margin, there is also a comma at the end of every sentence in the sender's address and in the receiver's address. Also, there is a comma here after Dear Mr. Jain. Another thing is there is use of Mr., Mrs., etc. in front of the person's name. And here, instead of saying Dear Ashok Jain, it says Dear Mr. Jain. Here it says Mrs. The senders is Mrs. A.K. John. A bit of difficulty in this system is that many a times it's very difficult, especially if you are writing an international letter, that the receiver is a Mr. or is not a Mr. If it is not a Mr., is it a Miss or a Mrs.? You don't know it. You don't want to call a Miss a Mrs. You don't want to call a Mrs. Mr. And you don't want to call a Mr. as Mrs. So the best way is not to write anything. However, in the exam and in real life, you have to follow the system of the country that you are living in, and it's good to know that there is another system and how to write letter in that system. But not only for exam purposes but also for real life, you have to follow the system of the country that you are living in. So it will be good to know what is the system in your country. And as I said, in India and in the UK and many other countries, this is the system that is followed. So what we learnt in this presentation, we learned that what are the different types of letters, what are the different styles of writing a letter, and we learned that how to write a good letter.